Hello, it's Stuart Bray here with part 2 of the video series looking at the Coraline inspired makeup with the button eyes. This video, very excited about. I was very pleased to do all this. Was the sculpting video, the whole sculpting process, very fun thing to do, and I was very pleased to document it in the detail that I did in order to show you exactly what went on and how I did it. So let's go take a look at the process. If you recall, in the first video when we looked at making cores, I made a plaster core and a modified resin core with a kind of an extra area around the outside edge that we built out. Now the first core we're going to be working on is the plaster core, and I'm going to paint on it a layer of KY jelly. Now if you don't know what KY jelly is, I suggest you Google it, but let's just say you can get it at a chemist's. You can use a good plaster separator. It's a water-based release agent. You paint on the surface of plaster and then it dries. And then you can sculpt on top of it, and then when you're done, you then immerse the entire plaster head in water and it reactivates the release agent so that you can actually slide the sculpt off the plaster surface. This is quite a handy technique because it allows you to actually sculpt a full head in one go, so you know what the entire makeup looks like, and then you can actually divide the makeup up into separate elements later, so you could cut the chin, the nose, the forehead and the cheeks etc. off, and then put them on separate cores to make individual appliances rather than making one full piece. I paint one good coat all over and I allow it to dry overnight. Now that our plaster is dry, you can begin work. So the first thing I need to do is figure out where my buttons are going to sit on the face. Incidentally, the buttons I'm using are just large coat buttons that I bought from like a fabric shop. Okay, what I need to do is pencil in the boundaries of where I want my appliance to actually finish. Now I'm going to be sculpting with a grey plastiline that I have, which is an oil-based clay. The first thing I need to do is melt some of this plastiline in a small saucepan that I keep just for this purpose. It took about 5 or 10 minutes to do this. Just keep it on a low heat, keep stirring it, and as it becomes more and more liquid, you can turn the heat off. Drizzle the molten plastiline in between my pencil lines so I can still see them. I don't want to lose those lines. Now the plastiline is cooled down and solidified, I can start using a sculpting tool to shape the areas in between the lines. I want them to look like the lines are caused by the buttons being pulled into the skin and they're radiating out from that centre. It's a good idea to use a strong directional light like a lamp, because then you can actually see the form much more easily. You'll notice I keep switching tools all the time. It's basically whatever feels right at any given moment, although I do tend to sort of cycle through the same 3 or 4 tools continuously. I also did an article about how to make your own loop tools. If you look underneath this video, you'll see an information box. If you click on that to expand it, you should find a link that takes you straight to that article. Now some areas need some little additions, so I'm going to add some small sausages of material, adding them and then blending them in to create those tight little ripples. And using the rake again, you can see how easily these now blend into the surface, and they stop looking like additions in the surface, and they now have become part of the face. So one last check with all the buttons just to make sure that it looks like it should, and we're ready to float this off into the carbon resin core. So in order to get this off the plaster without damaging it, what I'm going to do is soak the entire head in a bucket of water overnight. The plastiline is not affected by the water, so these materials work very well together. One thing I want to do is, whilst the plaster is soaking in the water, I'm going to take the nose off with a hacksaw and a rotary tool, because the nose is actually surplus to requirements. We don't need it for this, so we're going to just basically cut it off. There was a little hole in the top after I cut it off that I noticed was a little air pocket that I missed when I was filling the core with resin. So what I'm going to do is actually fill this with a bit of car body filler. And one neat trick is to use a little bit of cling film or plastic food wrap over the surface and smear that down just to kind of flatten it, make it nice and smooth. And then when that's cured, you can peel that away and you're left with a smooth surface that requires minimal sanding. Now we're ready to work on our resin core. Once the edges are lifted up with the tool, it should slide off quite easily. So now we have our sculpt, and the inside is an impression of the life cast, and there's a residue of KY jelly in there that we can just rinse off with water. And now we can take the sculpture that's come from the plaster core and very carefully place it onto the resin core, which is the same shape essentially, except now we actually have a sort of an area around the outside of the sculpt which is flared out from the sides. The plastiline is actually hardened up a little bit because it's been in cold water, but when you're pressing it down, just be careful to not leave any marks in your sculpted surface. So now I'm ready to finish the sculpture on this core. My job now is to get the edges really sweet and flattened out, so I go around carefully mopping up any water that I reveal as I go. Now it's a good idea to massage a little vaseline or petroleum jelly around the edge just to help smooth it out. It also helps the plastiline to stay stuck to the core. I already covered my detailing techniques in a 3-part video tutorial series, so if you haven't seen these, I suggest you check them out because they'll go into a lot more detail about how this kind of texture works. Using a small metal tool, I poke texture through the plastic to create a rough pour texture. You can also heat the surface up gently with a hairdryer. This softens the material and makes it easier to texture, and then you can place plastic food wrap over the surface and press a coarse stipple sponge onto the surface. If you peel away the plastic wrap, you reveal a nice basic texture that you can work over into with other tools. It's very good for doing large areas quickly. Into a solvent-proof container, I'm using a little shot glass here, break up little blobs of plastiline and cover them over with lighter fluid. Obviously, take all the precautions necessary when using a flammable liquid, so you want to do this in a ventilated area and you don't want any naked flames or cigarettes or anything like that near this. You can then mix it into a smooth mixture. You can add more plastiline or lighter fluid as necessary to get the right consistency. Then, taking a cheap paintbrush with the bristles cut down, flick a thin coat of this mixture over the surface. This creates a raised texture, as with goosebumps or rougher skin. All the texture we've done so far has been indented and pressed in, so it's nice to have another layer of texture with this which comes out slightly. Once the whole face has had a light coat of this, leave it to dry and allow the lighter fluid to evaporate. Probably takes about an hour. Then, using a drill with a countersink bit, I cut 3 location keys into the core. These are used to ensure that the mould we make later will relocate exactly every time. I also add a little body filler and just smooth the inside of each key, just to make it easier to open the mould later. Using the same mix, I also fill the lip line to smooth that out and take out any undercuts there. All these steps go towards ensuring that the mould we make later will open much more easily. And that concludes the sculpting video. Next time we'll take a look at the moulding process. If you have any questions, please feel free to get in touch through my site, leave a comment or email me direct. My email address is mail@learnprostheticmakeup.com. Thanks for watching.